Hey everyone, it's Zach, the broker of Zach Taylor Real Estate. Today I want to go over how to write a backup offer. So in this very, very competitive market, oftentimes homes are gone within the first couple of days. And so we still don't want to miss out because you never know that primary offer that they signed, the homeowners, it might fall through because of inspections, appraisal issues, whatever. So if we can get in as a backup and get that approved and signed off by the homeowners, we would automatically move into that first position should that first contract fall through. So how do we write a backup offer? Well, like I always say, there's a form for that. There's a TAR form. So purchase and sale agreement, if you have your contract right here, look up the form that is called the Backup Agreement Contingency Addendum. So this was created by TAR for us to use in a backup agreement situation. I really like using these addendums versus just special stips, where a lot of agents might say this is a backup agreement only. Let's give some clarity to it. Let's provide some different deadlines and terminology. So that's why I really prefer using addendums over just trying to put stuff in special stips, because then we run into trouble as far as if it's viewed as us practicing law. So let's use what's given to us. So first things first, when we're writing this offer, yes, the home is already under contract with somebody else. However, we want to come in and we want to be that secondary offer should anything fall through. We don't want the home to go back on the market for everybody. We want to be that locked in number 2 spot. So when you're writing this offer, under exhibits and addenda, all exhibits and or addenda attached here to listed below or referenced herein are made a part of this agreement. So we want to list backup agreement contingency addendum, because again, when you're writing contracts and you have addendums, it's almost like connecting the puzzle pieces. We have our contract and we have a backup addendum. Independently, if they sign this one without this terminology in here, the sellers are now in trouble because they've accepted 2 separate offers. And also vice versa, if they just sign off on a backup addendum and not this, there's no way to connect the pieces to say, well, what are the initial terms they're actually agreeing to? So we have to connect the puzzle pieces. That's why we listed here contingency addendum. And then we go to our backup agreement contingency addendum. So we'll just put number 1, we'll put our buyer's name, seller's name. Again, I'm just making everything up for this example. Property 123 Main Street. Now, I will read through this because we have the time, since this video is dedicated just to this addendum. We should know exactly what the different phrases and contingencies are within this. So line 4, this backup contingency addendum between the seller and buyer is entered into and is effective as of the binding agreement date provided in the purchase and sale agreement for the purpose of changing, deleting, supplementing, or adding terms to the purchase and sale agreement. In consideration of the mutual covenants herein and other good and valuable consideration, the receipt and sufficiency of which is hereby acknowledged, the parties agree to the following. So seller and buyer acknowledge that this agreement is a backup or secondary agreement to the primary agreement with a binding agreement date of. So in this blank, you're going to put the binding agreement date of that first offer. Whoever that first buyer is in first position, you will need to know that binding agreement date. So let's say they went under contract yesterday, and now we are writing this backup agreement today. That binding agreement date of that first offer goes here between seller and primary buyer regarding the above property. This agreement is contingent upon the primary agreement being terminated or becoming null and void. So we do not move into first position until that first one falls through. Upon the closing of the sale provided for in the primary agreement, this agreement shall become null and void. So obviously if the first buyer closes on the home, this agreement is no longer, it becomes null and void. Buyer acknowledges that seller shall have the right to amend the primary agreement without said amendment having the effect of placing this agreement into a primary position. So what that's saying is, hey, the seller in that first offer, they can amend or do whatever they want. They can push out the closing date. They can change their inspections. They can ask for repairs. We have no control over that. So that's what this is saying. Buyer acknowledges that the buyer shall have no right to examine or be advised of the terms of the primary agreement or any amendment thereto. So we're in secondary position. We are just that. We are secondary. We're out of the loop. We don't know anything besides probably the closing date with that primary agreement and what to look for. In the event the primary agreement is terminated or becomes null and void, seller or seller's representative shall deliver to buyer or buyer's representative written notice, at which time the contingency provided in this addendum is satisfied, and this agreement shall move into primary position. The date buyer or buyer's representative, this is the most important line right here. 21, the date buyer or buyer's representative receives written notice that the primary agreement has been terminated or is null and void will serve as the initial date for all time periods specified. So when you move into primary position, that first contract fell through, you are now primary, that starts day 0. So then when you have your earnest money 3 days out or whatever you put in for there, let's say you have 3 days to turn your earnest money. When you move into first position, now that timer starts. That's day 0. Next day is day 1, day 2. So that's for inspections, appraisals, whatever time frames you have in your primary or in your offer, the clock now starts. Everything except the purchase or the closing date. So the closing date, that's the only thing that I don't like with this form. When you attach this, you have to pick almost kind of an arbitrary closing date. So you don't know when you're going to move into first position. So I always like to say, for example, let's say you need a loan on the property. Well, typically a lot of lenders want about 30, 45 days to close out a loan, conventional FHA. So I typically suggest, hey, if we're writing a backup agreement, we don't know when we might move into first position. Let's extend out this closing date for a sec. And we can always adjust it if need be, but maybe we do like a 60-day time frame. Hey, maybe that first one, they have inspections for the first 15 days, then they get the appraisal, or maybe the financing falls through. Let's just put out 60 days. That way we're not constantly having to get extensions signed. So that's what I would suggest. So let's say, for example, today is the 22nd of May. So June, July. Let's just put the 22nd day of July. So that's the only time frame that does not automatically start on when you move into primary position. This is still into effect. So if your backup offer, let's say the first one keeps getting extended and pushed out, and let's say it's now July 23rd, unless you've extended the closing date of this backup, your backup now becomes null and void. So we do have to be aware of that. But that's again why I said, let's just go ahead and push this out. That way we don't have to keep signing extensions. So let's go back to our backup agreement. Here we are. So primary agreement has been terminated, null and void will serve as the initial date for all time periods specified. So now number 7. So I'm going to read 7A, but I'm going to explain why I like 7B. So 7A, until blank, you pick a date at which time buyers shall have the option of either terminating this agreement by delivering written notice thereof to seller or extending the date set forth in this paragraph by delivering to seller or seller's representative a signed proposed amendment to this agreement, which sets forth a new date through which this agreement shall remain in effect. So let's say, hey, we have until the 31st to either terminate this backup agreement or ask for an extension. And that's kind of why I don't really care for this first one, is because the seller has to agree to that extension. And it's just one more time frame for you guys to have to remember as a backup agreement. You might be out writing other offers on different homes or whatever else. And unless you're keeping up with this, I like to just do B, because this is saying this agreement shall remain in effect until buyer terminates it by delivering to seller or seller's representative a written notice of termination at any time prior to the time buyer receives notice from seller that the primary agreement is terminated or has become null and void. So unless the seller has already notified us, hey, you guys are now the primary, I can cancel at any time up until this closing date within this agreement. So that's why I like this one. It's a little bit more flexibility. And then if we're out there viewing other homes, writing other offers, we can go ahead and pull this one and then go binding on another agreement. So that's why I like this one. It's just one less date to remember. It allows you to either pull your offer, or if the seller's closed on the first one, this in general becomes null and void. So that's why I like this one. And then again, it says written notice. So written notice shall be in writing, either in person, overnight delivery, fax, postal service, or email. So text message does not suffice in the state of Tennessee. So if I want to pull this backup offer at any time down the road, I need to do so in email or notification form or something in writing. So that's what I would recommend. Again, you can't just text the other agent and say, hey, we're pulling our backup offer. Let's do something more official, email or the notification form. And then notice shall be deemed to have been given as of the date and time it is actually received. And this agreement is made part of the purchase and sale agreement as if quoted there in verbatim. So that's why we're kind of attaching the puzzle pieces on this line right here. So another thing that I think as I wrap up this video is from the legal hotline for Tennessee Realtors. So I have submitted a backup offer on a property on behalf of my buyer. The listing agent sent a backup agreement contingency addendum and all parties have signed it. Do all parties need to sign the backup offer as well? Or is it signed only if and when the contract is withdrawn or falls through? So they're asking, hey, do we also have to sign the purchase sale agreement? This is the attorney's response. All parties would need to sign the purchase sale agreement submitted by your buyer with the backup agreement contingency addendum. Without signing the original offer, no agreement is in place. The addendum is only effective if attached to an executed agreement. So again, if everybody agrees to this, you be the backup, the seller should check accept and sign off. Because if everybody just signs this, we don't know what the original terms of the purchase sale agreement are, which purchase and sale. So we have to attach two puzzle pieces. Everybody has to sign both if they agree this is the backup agreement. So hopefully this helps you guys out with writing backup offers. I really like using B because it just gives more flexibility. Hey, we're now the backup offer and we can pull it at any time with written notice. So I hope this helps you guys out. Again, ask me if you guys have any questions with writing contracts or any of the wording, and I will see you guys next time.